Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Stronghold Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Barton. And on this podcast, we explore capability and truth. And one thing we're going to do today, the topic of the episode, is going to be kind of end of the year. It's going to be my last solo podcast of the year. Next week, we'll have a guest to finish up 2024 and then on to 2025. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to run through kind of a recap of 2024 really quickly. I wanted to get into some new life lessons that have been extremely impactful. I would say life lessons I don't quite understand, but I think that they are all, along with 24, growing me and preparing me for a lot in the year of 2025. And then I just want to talk about at the end a little bit of the podcast future, some ideas, some sneak previews of topics that we'll be discussing. So hang with me. I'm going to get through the 2024 recap really quickly and then get into some woo-woo. So for those of you who don't know me, I definitely have a woo-woo side to me, and my friends that love and know me and kind of appreciate what I bring to the table support me in that. So I want to cover a little bit of that experience along with the new life lessons. So jumping right in, as I mentioned, 2024 was really a year of growth and preparation. And again, I'm going to keep it brief, but I had two primary goals for 2024. And the first was to create dynamic spaces for spiritual transformation. These are spaces of community, supporting others, building others up, giving them the resources to find the best version of themselves, supporting their exploration of capability and truth, and really serving the Lord. The best way I always describe it is to create places of community, create places of gathering, dynamic spaces, as I said, in the goal, and set them up and then get out of the way and allow the Lord to work in people's hearts. And so that was my first goal. And if I'm grading that, that was a resounding success, a big old check mark on that one. And that's also a life goal. That's something that I plan on carrying forward the rest of my life. So that one's good. The second was to achieve record promotion, pay, and professional success through authenticity, through being my most sincere self. I don't want the Dave Barton that is at work or family or in my community to be a different version. I don't want to have to damper that down. And I want to find people who support that. I want to be around that in every aspect of my life. And I guess when I look at that, the goal is not for myself to be authentic, because I would say that I'm a very authentic person. But again, it was to shed any inauthentic behavior that maybe I exhibited due to setting. When I look at this goal, initially, just full transparency, that was a big failure. Achieving record promotion, pay, professional success. I'm still in the same job. I still have the same title. I still have the same pay. And when I think about it, I put in a lot of work to alter that. If I'm accountable, I really do feel like I put in the work and I was accountable. But I think what that means is that, as I mentioned for 2024, that 2024 was just growth and preparation for something larger. And if I break it down, which is I think is always good to do when we look at goals and maybe we say we fell a little bit short. What did we do to achieve that goal? And maybe the timing that we envisioned, and we do a lot of that with years. If it didn't fall within a certain year, then it was a failure. Well, when I broke it down, I felt significantly better because 2024 was a year of growth and preparation for me. If I just back that up and some highlights, if there's any highlights that you know me and we participated in together or individuals, I don't mean to leave anyone out. Just a quick overview of 2024 and things that really built up that growth and preparation for good things to come. This past March, I joined a group called Forge Ferocity. And very quickly, what I got out of that group was just really recharging and finding strength. I had been in so many serving situations where I was serving others and reaching behind and kind of helping them up and supporting. And when you do that, I think it's important for anyone to know that serving, while it is extremely rewarding, is that you have to have an environment where you recharge, you fill your tank back up. And through Forge Ferocity, the men and women within that group, I found that, and I am extremely thankful, and it was a huge blessing this year. So going from March to August, I went out in August to Washington State to an event called Guns and Geese. And I also had an opportunity to appear on Greg Anderson's Endless Endeavor podcast. There was a couple of things that came out of that weekend. And on the podcast, I mentioned that August 2024, I was bookending my life. And so I had gotten to the age of 48. And what I wanted to do was really bookend those prior 48 years because I had to do better. I had to reach higher levels. I had to be challenged more, mind, body, and soul. And I had challenged myself a lot from the body perspective, from physical challenges over the last handful of years, in a steady progression there. But I needed that to branch out into my mind and my soul as well, and to continue that exploration of truth and capability within those areas of that three-legged stool. So on the podcast, I had mentioned kind of bookending. What I found was exactly what I needed at that Guns and Geese experience. One, I got to meet some of the great human beings that are in the Forge Ferocity group with me. Also, the cadre that led Guns and Geese, both the Gregs and Greg Anderson and Greg Lappin, Joel Assis, who led the jiu-jitsu, and everyone who was involved with that event that weekend just were tremendous human beings. Sometimes you build people up in your mind, and then when you meet them in person, they let you down. This was not the case. In this instance, they completely exceeded all expectation. What I got out of that weekend was huge for me. It was the first time in a long time, first time maybe ever, that I had practiced something called fellowship. I had found men who were ahead of me on paths or areas of life that I gained trust in, that I could confide with, that I felt comfortable following their example. And that wasn't just for the weekend, that was going to be for life going forward. So, huge event there. But what the cost of admission was, and I don't think it was necessarily ever expressed in words, was it was a value exchange. And so my determination from that point forward, and with Forge Ferocity, and in all settings, is there's a requirement of value. Meaning when I have interactions with the people, communities, friends, family that I love, that I value, I in exchange will bring value to those situations. That's just the pact. That's the agreement that I made going forward. So going from August, that was the end of August, to the end of September, so a month later, I attended a Wild at Heart retreat. And so again, I'm building through this to kind of build into where these life lessons I'm learning maybe originated from, and what prepared me to receive the life lessons, or hang on, because the woo-woo's coming, that I have been receiving in the last few weeks and months. At the end of September, this is when things kind of picked up in a progression standpoint. I went to a retreat called Wild at Heart. And what I experienced there was many things. The first large one was really embracing the name that God would have for me, not the false identities, the false names that the world had assigned to me. And through 4 days of basically, I'm going to call it counseling, because we go through video exercises and then we spend time with God individually, just alone in quiet time. And I hadn't done that in my adult life, really. Set my life aside, understood how to connect with God, and then connect it with God in my adult life. And it was moving. And the first thing, like I said, was really shedding those false identities that I had picked up. And mine were the names that the world had given me, and especially through my childhood, were not enough and not a priority. So not enough and not a priority. It was titles and names and worth that I had been carrying with me for 48 years. Maybe less if we're talking when I picked them up. But up to 48 years old, I had been carrying not enough and not a priority on my back in every interaction, in every community, in every friendship, in every relationship in my family. I'd been carrying those names with me. So that weekend at that Wild at Heart retreat, I was given the empowerment to set that aside. So in tandem with that, another of the most powerful experiences I had, and I've talked about this with only a handful of human beings. And I was actually talking with a friend, Tim, and his son was just baptized. And it kind of took me back to this Wild at Heart weekend, because I was baptized that weekend. But let me explain, because it's not the typical baptism experience. We had been going through a video series, and like I said, every video series is maybe 50 minutes. We would then have 50 minutes, maybe a little bit over an hour, to just find a spot on the property. And it was just a beautiful up north Minnesota property right on the river. And we would spend time with God. And here's where the woo-woo maybe starts to come in. I don't believe it is. I don't believe in having contact or my Lord speaking to me, that's any woo-woo. I believe that's a good connection. And while I was writing, I'm not a poet, the Lord put these words on my heart. And I would say he spoke this creed to me through writing. And the creed that he spoke to me, that I wrote down, was put my old self to death and face the fires of life naked, free of fig leaves, and emboldened as the image bearer of an almighty God. So let me read that one more time. Put to death my old self and face the fires of life naked, free of fig leaves, and emboldened as the image bearer of an almighty God. This was my creed to go forward, but I needed to do something first. So on that property was a river, the Big Fork River. And a couple of things about me. I don't really care for rivers. I grew up in Minnesota, so a lot of lakes, but rivers I never really trusted. The flowing current, and you can't really see the bottom. And I grew up with a lot of fear of rivers. So I sat on the edge of the dock, and I took this piece of paper with this creed that the Lord had given to my heart and that I'd written down on paper. And I looked at the water moving. And a little bit of backstory, I wanted to be baptized 2 years ago as an adult, because when I was baptized as a child, but had no appreciation for it. Actually, the time period of my life that I was baptized as a child, I was probably the worst version of myself ever, just as far as unmanageable and a hellion, as my parents probably would have described it lightly. But 2 years ago, I was supposed to be baptized in a lake with my sons. But the lake actually got swimmer's itch, and the lake baptism was canceled. And so we put that on hold. I think that happened for a reason, because I don't think that I would have came to the mindset on this Wild at Heart retreat that I did, sitting there on the edge of the dock, looking at the water pass, just in reflection of my life up to that point, that bookend, that prior 48 years, and how I would move forward as a man, shedding the identity of not enough and not a priority, and taking on a new name that the Lord had given me that weekend of King. That means accountable to community, accountable to my loved ones, accountable to those that are around me, bringing the best version of myself and bringing value to my interactions. So I sat there and I reread that. Put to death my old self and face the fires of life naked. No more pretending, free of fig leaves, no more false identities, no more false names, embracing the name that the Lord would have for me, and emboldened as the image bearer of an almighty God. I don't need the world's encouragement. I have the Lord on my side. I am an image bearer. And I repeated that until I could repeat that from memory. And then I looked at the water, and the Lord said, be baptized. And I went under the water, and I came back up. And that was a true ceremony of bookending the prior 48 years of my life and shedding those false identities. And again, I've shared this with a handful of people, and so I get a little bit emotional here. But that was quite the weekend, very powerful. And I think that really, in combination with those prior events I mentioned, 2024, started to put me in a mindset to receive. That was a spiritual experience. So I always talk about the mind, body, and soul, a three-legged stool. The next experience, I would say, was primarily focused on body. And that was completion of a marathon that I've been training for over 2 years. A little bit of context of that was that last October 23rd, or October 2023, excuse me, I was supposed to run a marathon that in Minnesota on the first weekend of October was canceled due to heat being well into the 90s. So that's extremely rare. I reached that marathon in that training period running, I would say, considerably faster pace than I ended up running this year. but I was damaged. I was injured. I had significant knee injuries that would have made that day agonizing. And so I needed to step away. I needed to reevaluate whether this was going to be a goal that I attacked. And for 2024, I couldn't put it aside. And so for 2024, I trained and I ran and I put in the miles. And I reached points during the marathon training. A friend actually, a couple of weeks prior to my marathon, ran a marathon in a phenomenal time. And I texted him just congratulating him. He just beasted out a marathon, his first marathon. And he asked, how's the training going? I had just come off the longest run of my training and the day before, and I was broken down. I didn't know how I was going to put myself back together to go 26.2 miles at the competitive pace that I wanted to put myself together. But just like that Wild at Heart retreat, I started to get space from the training miles. I started to go on taper and reduce the miles I was running every week. And steadily, every day, getting space from that thing that was damaging me, damaging my body, I start to feel better. I start to feel stronger. And that pace started to come down. Now, there was an agreement early in training that I had to make with myself that it wasn't going to be 2023. I still am carrying some knee issues to this day. And I needed to be okay with that pace not being where I wanted it to be, where I was. I wasn't back to how strong I was the year before, but I needed to be okay with how I was going to go forward. And I was sitting in the hotel room the night before the race, and a friend texted me this. And this is thanks again, Russ. This carried me through. But my friend Russ texted me, be a beacon of light for the Lord. And for some reason, that took all the pressure off me. That took the pressure of what pace I would run and what time I would have. I knew I was going to get under a goal time, or were going to have to drag me off the course, my corpse off the course. I knew I was going to get below a certain time, and I'll go into that shortly. But that, from a friend, from a trusted brother in Christ, to say, be a beacon of light for the Lord, it just gave me purpose. It gave me focus. And it took the focus off me. And a little bit of a story, as I ran the race, a couple of things. It was the first time ever, and you talk about a body standpoint, that I pushed my body in every stride for 3 hours and 54 minutes, which was my completion time. Under 4 hours was my goal, so I accomplished that. But 3 hours and 54 minutes, every stride. I thought, be in the moment, be in the stride, push, you could do it. You have to do it. You don't know how you're going to feel at the end of the race, the middle of the race. You don't know if you're going to hit a wall. You got to keep going. And I was in that mindset for 3 hours and 54 minutes, just determined. And about mile 24, with about a little over 2 miles left, I came up to one of the final water stations. And there was another man running the race, younger than me, in great shape, but he was suffering. And I would say I was not doing well at that point. I was actually having to swing my arms to get my thighs going when I slowed down to get water, just kind of like grunting to get myself to move forward and to keep a decent pace. And he was scuffling. And out of the water station, I started running, and I started to swing my arms and get my thighs going and try to get myself moving again. And here I see that this man just kind of broken down by this race. And I said, hey, brother, I'm feeling it too, but I'm pushing myself, and let's finish this strong and just pace off me. I'm going to stay just in front of you, but just keep up. I'm not setting a blistering pace, so just keep up with me. And he kept up with me. And at times those last 2 miles, I would look behind and he'd be a little bit farther off, and I would be going, but I was slowing down too. But he could see me, and I was that beacon of light that my friend Russ had texted me. And, I guess what I'm saying is that from a marathon perspective and a body perspective and experience, that having purpose and going through that and, creating a process was so empowering. So that Wild at Heart retreat was, again, the spiritual or the soul. This was the body. And then all of this, so that Wild at Heart retreat was September 26th. The marathon was the middle of October. And on October 26th, I completed a 7-day dry fast. So, what a 7-day dry fast is no food and no water. And I've got an episode, actually, excuse me. I have an episode about that dry fast and the experience too. So, check that out for more detail. But with the 7-day dry fast, this was the mind. And so, soul, body, mind. So, mind, body, and soul, I'm tackling here within the course of a month after all this growth and preparation in 2024. And the 7-day dry fast brought a couple of physical things too. I would say the biggest thing is that I'm learning. One is restoration. My knees, my toes from running, shoulder, a jaw, a hip, a rib, all of them feel, if not healed, significantly better and got kind of the raw materials to heal. And they have continued to do so. I also feel like from now going back into workouts and lifting for the winter, that either my ability to assimilate HGH or produce human growth hormone is increased. My workouts are insane. I feel very strong. And I'm seeing gains that I haven't seen in my 40s ever. I thought they were gone. Aside from that, the 7-day dry fast was really a focus in the mind. I would say I was stripped down to nothing. And in that experience, I continue to find purpose. I continue to receive those things, those life lessons that I had, or those lessons that I had received, experiences I had received in 2024, and process those. Because a dry fast, no water, no food, it feels like I explained it, it feels like you're carved out from the inside. And the great thing about going through that and experiencing that and enduring that is you also at the end of it feel extremely empowered to give power to what then would return, what I would fill myself with, what I would be exposed to with in my society and my surroundings and my community and my friendships and my family, and my diet, what I would intake. When you're carved out and you feel like you don't have anything left and you start to put things back in, you appreciate them so much more. And that isn't just food, that isn't just water, that's relationships and that's moments. And so that's one thing the 7-day dry fast prepared me for. And again, this Wild at Heart retreat, this marathon, this dry fast, this is all in the course of a month. The best way I can say is that all of these left me in a state to receive. And if you've hung with me this far, I think here comes the woo-woo. And so those that know me, again, they know that with my wife, talking about energies and talking about things that maybe are non-traditional in a Christian religion are commonplace in our household. And my friends that know me and that love me and that appreciate the value that I bring, appreciate and love me for this. So I'm okay discussing them because of this, but just jumping in. The new life lessons. So that was 2024 and what it prepared me for and the growth that it provided. And again, it left me in a state to receive these lessons. I would say, put in one sentence, that my eyes have been open to energy and God. There's no more blinders. There's no more shields. That I've been exposed to something that I don't exactly understand, but I know it is from God. And when you talk about energies and God, I think a question that people might ask, if they kind of stay away from the woo-woo or bend to societal pressure, is that they might think that I'm diverging from God and my faith, by believing in energies. And I'll get into what I mean. I would just say with an exclamation mark, no, that's not the case. At this point in my life, I believe that energies that we feel, that we experience, social settings, I think they're the fingerprints of God. And I think that they represent his presence. I think that they represent a creator and that these energies hold life. It's the DNA of the world that we experience. I went beyond that though, because I'm analytical and I Googled how many people in the US alone are religious. And in 2023, that number was 47% of Americans would identify as religious. That's approximately 157 million people. And that actually means a few things to me. In my opinion, that means that there are many others who believe in energy and energies other than me. Second, I think that this might explain why those that don't believe in energies or bend to societal pressures around woo-woo type things and just laugh it off or devalue it, I think it explains why they feel distant from God. Because you hear that in the Christian community and other religious communities, that they feel like they can't hear from God, that God can't speak to them, that they feel disconnected at times, that they feel a need to recommit their life to Him instead of living in relation with Him. And I really think that being turned off to even the idea of there being energies is a major factor. So I had a recent experience that I'm going to go through, and I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize for how it sounds. I experienced it, and only thing I will apologize for up front is that words are going to fall short. It is not good. My words are not going to explain the impact. My words are not going to be able to set the stage for this. And I apologize for that. I don't mean to devalue the experience, but I feel it's important to share because I want people to be awake and open to what I'm experiencing and to look inward. And then through that, be able to have a closer relationship with the God that they serve. So I was at Trader Joe's, and this was the weekend before Christmas, and I was in suburbia America. Everybody was shopping. They were shopping for last second dinners and last second Christmas gifts. And there was the stress of the holidays and the impending doom of the in-laws. And you could just feel the anxiety and the pressure and the stress and the tension of a large collective of people. And I was in line to check out. And my wife texted me and she asked, how is the energy in this city that I was shopping? And if you know my wife and I, asking questions like, how is the energy? That's just our everyday life. We ask each other that all the time. We have discussions about energies all the time. And I could only describe it in one phrase: batshit crazy, because it was the weekend before Christmas and it was insane. I followed that text up by saying, but I'm working on operating at a higher frequency. So elevating above the stress, the tension, the anxiety of that crowd, and to be mindful, to be in the moment, to be appreciative for the blessings I have in life, to be appreciative for the energy that I feel inside. I was operating on a higher frequency, a higher vibration. So she texted me back and she said, yes, exclamation mark, push it outward. So I'm three people back from the front of the line here in the checkout, and it's going slow. So I took a moment. I closed my eyes and I did a little breathing exercise. I just kind of focused, like, 5 seconds inhale, hold for 5 seconds, 5 seconds exhale, hold at the bottom, and I repeated that 2 or 3 times. And then I focused on that higher frequency, that energy that I had inside me, that positivity, that self-belief, that empowered feeling that I get from being an image bearer of an almighty God. And I just focused on that, and I grabbed onto that, and it was me. And I just focused on pushing that outward, being focused on my breath and pushing that energy outward. And then I opened my eyes. And all the tension, all the stress, all the anxiety that I was picking up, that I was receiving, was gone. I was projecting. I was broadcasting an energy. I get up to the front of the line, and all I can do is explain it as a shift. So I had that shift of the stress, the tension, the anxiety, the receiving, to broadcasting this energy, this inward energy that I carried. And it was going to be received. As I got to the checkout, I got up to the cashier. And the cashier, again, I'm at Trader Joe's in suburbia, Minnesota. The cashier was radiant. this is where words will fall short. Beautiful, captivating. They fall short because they kind of describe her as a female and me being male in the way I saw her. And so I want to say radiating, but I want to say those other words to kind of set up the stage, but go beyond that. She radiated a positive energy, a powerful energy. I was broadcasting, she was receiving. And in that moment, I would say the whole setting of the store shifted. I was not there among the lower vibrational people that were in that store. It was myself and this cashier operating and functioning together, broadcasting and receiving, positive, strength, light. Again, words are going to fall short, and I can't say it to say other than I was not the vibration and the frequency that I was operating and that she was operating on were the same, but they were distinctly different and took us away from the vibration and frequency of the other people in that store. So that was the experience. I left and I was filled with energy, and it actually left me exhausted, and it left me kind of with a strong sense of curiosity, and I'm going to explore that. But it also brought a couple things flooding back to my mind. Just earlier this year, I mentioned I went out to Guns and Geese, and when I went out to Guns and Geese, this is another experience of energy exchange. But I was flying out to Seattle, and this isn't first class, but I was in the very front of the plane. But I was flying Sun Country, so there is no first class. Everybody's coach or kind of the same seats. I just happened to be in the very front of the plane. There was nobody in the seat between me, but in the next seat, there was a gentleman that sat down. And as we were getting going, all I can say is this gentleman looked sick. He was not doing good from a health standpoint, and he seemed very anxious about flying. Across the aisle from me, on the other window seat adjacent to the window seat that I was sitting on, was another younger man, and he had, I would say, a super mask. Like you think about the COVID mask, it was like a super mask. You could tell he was really into wearing this mask, and he looked even more anxious than the gentleman. So I guess the gentleman next to me maybe just looked sick and was reflecting a really low energy and a high level of anxiety. This gentleman with a mask was that times 1,000. Like I was actually, from a protective nature, kind of monitoring what he was doing, because he made me nervous. Just even being in his presence, and the people next to him were feeling that too. You could tell they were kind of angling and moving their body away from him to create space, even though they had to sit right next to him. And again, the anxiety, the stress, the tension started flooding into me, and I was receiving that. And I started to actually feel nauseous. I don't get nauseous when I fly, so it's not a flight thing. It's not being stuck inside a little tube with a lot of low quality air. But I just felt nauseous from the energy. And so I closed my eyes. I don't know why I did it. And this was before the weekend. I actually learned a lot of breathing exercise on this Guns and Geese weekend too. Is before that, I just focused on my breath, and I got that under control again. And again, I felt, before my wife had texted me this most recent time, push outward, I just felt like I had positivity in me, that I had a better way to view things, a better way to function. And I didn't know the words for it. And I still don't know exactly, but I just focused on pushing that outward. And I pushed it outward, and I felt like it extended outside of my body. You know, if I had to say and describe it, like a foot or 2 feet, it kind of emanated around me of this different energy. And I tried to like consciously shift what I was experiencing. And I opened my eyes. And the gentleman one seat over from me that was sharing, there was a seat in between us, actually put his coat, his jacket between us in the seat. And he started to, I'd say, ease up from a body language standpoint. And we actually started to engage in conversation. He was talking about where he was going, and he's going to see his grandchildren, and had a really good exchange. And his tone, his body language changed from that moment going forward. And then across the aisle from me, in the adjacent window seat, the gentleman with the mask took his mask off, and he started to have exchanges with the stewardess. friendly exchanges, his tension, his anxiety, the kind of, I would say, odd behavior that he had exhibited up to that point was gone. And I don't know. I don't know what you would call that. You know, I'm not going to try to describe it. I'm not going to cheapen it by trying to explain it. There was another event. There's actually two more I want to run through really quick. I'm going to speed through these. But of these energetic exchanges, and one was a few years back. And for those of you who know, through the rioting that happened in Minnesota, a lot of Minneapolis was burnt to the ground. And I went to an event, I would say, a little while later in downtown Minneapolis. And the event was for a mission that I serve. And it was kind of an end of the year gala. And it was a celebration of this money raised and the people who were helped. And it was, I guess, as far as from like an energy perspective, it was very high. It was a huge appreciation for the lives changed and what we were able to impact as human beings. And my wife and I walked out of that, and we walked down, I would say, 2 or 3 blocks into the parking ramp that we had parked at. And so again, this is Minneapolis, the Minneapolis that just a little while before had almost been burnt to the ground with rioters and just a lot of bad characters, and I would say evil. And we're in the parking ramp, and we go into the elevator to go up a few levels to where we had parked. And I looked at my wife and I said, "What do you feel right now?" And she said one word: darkness. And then she said, "How do you feel?" And I said to her, "That's the only word I can describe right now." And I'm not talking about nighttime or there wasn't a lot of streetlights around, because it was dark. It was downtown Minneapolis. And there was certainly a sense of not being safe. But it was a darkness beyond not being light. It was a darkness of energy. It was a overwhelming. I would say we were awash in darkness. Again, we had just come from an event that was a light bearing event, a high energy, a highly positive, a great experience. So we had that contrast. Now we're in evil, we're in darkness, we're void of anything uplifting, any light, and we're experiencing that contrast. So we didn't experience on the way in. And it was dark. It's winter in Minnesota, so it was dark before we got there. But going out, that contrast provided just a feeling of being awash in darkness. I would say that's what really woke me up to there is energies, certainly energies in life. And I didn't know how to process it. I just experienced it. I was overwhelmed. And my wife and I shared that. And I think that's really when together we got these discussions and these texts of like, how is the energy, and being aware and being cognizant and being intentional in the settings that we're in at any given moment of what the energies are. But the experience, going back to the very first one of being in this grocery store, brought something back into my mind that I haven't thought about for over 25 years. And it was being in college and going into college. I changed my major many times, but I read a book when I was in college by John Douglas. It's called Mind Hunter. And whatever my major was at that point changed. I was going to be a criminology major. I was going to work for the FBI, and I was going to hunt serial killers. I became obsessed with it. I read every book about serial killers. I read every textbook that I could get my hands on. I was immersed in this idea of being a criminal profiler and hunting serial killers. I didn't associate that with anything other than, hey, this was pretty cool. And I don't really know what I want to do with my life, but if I have to do something, this sounds pretty amazing. And it sounds kind of cool too. But this experience in the grocery store, all these years later, 25 years later, it made me realize that maybe I recognized darkness even back then. And I wanted to try to stamp out that darkness. So why am I not a criminal profiler for the FBI? Well, when my son was born, my first son, I felt what I now identify as not strong enough to turn that type of darkness away. And I realized or felt or experienced, I don't know how to phrase it, that if I pursued that evil that I would be hunting would come for me, that would come for my family, that would come for my loved ones. I can understand that now in context, this experience put that into context. Again, my mind rushed back to that event almost 25 years earlier. And so I changed my major and I went away from that direction for my life. And I never associated why. I thought maybe it's just changing my major again, being disinterested. But that impact of that decision of having a child that I was responsible for and wanting to protect that child from something, from this darkness, this dark energy that I would bring into my family if I would pursue this path in my life. It all connected. So again, it's hard to put words to these experiences and these energies. And I know I'm coming up short. But another thing I appreciate about this podcast experience is documenting these and that it's a gift. Another thing that I learned here towards the end of 2024, and then I kind of want to get into a vision for the future, is the term epinomy. And epinomy is a Greek term. It means persistence. And when it's applied to humans, it means enduring oneself. So how did I come across this? Just really quick. I follow this Instagram account that he looks at the symbolism behind religion. And he had a Greek Orthodox priest on. And I don't know why I stopped and listened to it. But about 5 minutes in, they talked about this term. This Greek Orthodox priest talked about this term of epinomy. So enduring oneself. And again, I just made this huge connection that from 2018 to now, that was my life in a summary. I started to learn how to endure myself, how to, despite the destructive nature that I had inside, to be lazy, to be sedentary, that I would pursue something better, that the Lord had something better for my life, mind, body, and soul. And here I am in 2024 making these connections that I just shared with you. But if I had to sum it up, epinomy was one word that meant enduring oneself, that it tied it all together. It ties this podcast together in one word, exploring truth and capability. Why does that matter? Ultimately, it's for me, but I want it for each of you too, as you listen to this message, to start exploring your own truth and your own capability, to endure yourself. But with that in mind, you have to turn now with growth and preparation of 2024, we're turning towards 2025. And I have a 10-year journey that I want to embark on, that I've started to. It's a wealth combined with a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And I estimate it's going to be about a 10-year journey. But on wealth, I actually want to start by speaking something into existence. And that's my mission. So I'm just going to read it. And it says, I will create dynamic spaces for spiritual transformation. Again, that life goal that I checked off for 2024 that was extremely successful. I know I can do that. So I will carry that forward as my life mission. But in combination, and this is why I want to speak into existence, is that I will create a retreat in nature. It's going to be on the water. It's going to be in a deep woods. It's going to be full of adventures. It will be a place of reclamation, healing, restoration, truth, and value. Lives will be impacted eternally. Men's hearts made whole. Marriages recharged. And children blessed with the love of their parents. I am speaking that into existence, and I will create that as a dynamic space for spiritual transformation. So how? How am I going to do that? It's good to have intentions. It's good to speak into existence, but life requires action. It's never been more clear for me that I'm going to just continue to do what I did in 2024 and emphasize and project even stronger to bring value to all my environments, all my community, all my friendships, all the things I'm associated with that I give my energy to, I am going to bring value to those exchanges. So that's my Minnesota community. That's my new friends of Forge Ferocity, my brothers and sisters within that group. And I have no excuses. I'm surrounded by rock solid influencers across the mind, body, and soul perspective. 2024 surrounded me, embraced me, impacted me, and is going to power me towards this success of that mission that I just spoke into existence. I have no excuses. Another thing that is going to enable success in this area is that I have sought in 2024 to be in bigger rooms where I can enter and I can just be quiet and I can shut up and I can listen and I can learn and I can be mentored and I can practice that fellowship that I spoke of and experienced at the Guns and Geese this last August. I can carry that forward and become a better version, an elevated and empowered version of myself by being in bigger rooms. The good news about 2024, even though I fell short on that second goal for this year, is that I found out where those bigger rooms are at, and I know how to get into them. I'm going to continue to provide value to open those doors. So that's the how. Here's what I know. 2025 is going to bring something more than I have ever experienced. I know that I can't even conceptualize or put into words what it's going to be right now, and I'm not going to try, but I can tell you this. I am in a state to receive, and I feel it to my core. And I will bring value to open those doors and to pay the price of admission. That's the price of admission, is to bring value to those interactions, to those people, to those communities, to those groups, and to serve. I know I can do that, and I will do that. So that's a lot. And I want to take a little pause there to just give appreciation for everyone that has come alongside me in 2024, a year of growth and preparation, a year of finding purpose, a year of empowerment, a year of experiencing energies and starting to understand and put those things together. I'm so thankful for the experiences and people that I've come across. So if you are one of those people, there's a high chance, a high likelihood that you know you are, because I've expressed appreciation and gratitude, but I will continue to do that as well. But just know I'm bringing value in 2025 to our exchanges. I love you all and I appreciate you. So shifting from that, I just want to give a little preview of like what this experience, the Stronghold podcast, I'm going to start calling it just the Stronghold community, is going to bring in 2025. So a preview of topics, just to shift and have a little fun here. Some topics that we're going to discuss: the lost male, or betas, as people call them. We're going to go in depth and we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about keys to parenting. If I've done one thing in life pretty well to very good, it's to be a parent. Both my wife and I, and it's a team effort. As partners, we've done extremely well in that department. I'm going to talk about the life of a data nerd, because I am a self-described data nerd and I love it. And I have another data nerd that I'm going to bring on as a subject matter expert. And we're going to talk dragons. Yeah, dragons. I know it's a hot topic, and we're going to dive into that. I'm going to have more guests and more stories. The blessing of my year has been starting this podcast and hearing these stories of these individuals. And I feel like it's me, again, setting up the equipment and taking a chair and them taking a seat across from me and just asking these questions and receiving their stories. It's been extremely powerful, and I'm going to carry that forward. So more guests to come on the Stronghold podcast. And then some of the solo episodes, I have an idea that I'm going to evolve them into collaborative deep dives. So it's going to be kind of a combination of a solo podcast and a guest podcast, where it's going to be me, the expert, a topic, and 30 minutes, and just go and deep dive on it. And when 30 minutes is up, 30 minutes is up. So we're going to keep it very short, digestible, consumable, but very driven home by two people talking about a deeper dive on a topic. So that's to come, and be excited about. Some community goals. Again, I want to turn this into a community. And so community building is about serving and providing environments to explore, in this case, truth and capability. And I've started off 2025 with Project Winning. If you look at my YouTube, on my Instagram, there's details about how we're going to go about that. But it's just the first 106 days or 29% of 2025. We're going to start off on a winning note. And then infrastructure updates. I have a goal for the studio of completion by the end of Q2 2025. So for those of you not in business, the end of a quarter, Q2 is the end of June. And so by the end of June, I'm going to have a studio behind me, not this curtain, not a pop-up studio, but more of a permanent structure. And why that's important is not just for the aesthetics of my podcast, but what I plan to do is to open that studio to creators so they can amplify other impactful stories and create and get in touch with themselves too as creators and explore that capability in themselves. I also am going to streamline my social presence just as like one final note and to be more focused on Instagram and YouTube. And those are both going to be found at Stronghold Pod. So at Stronghold Pod, you can find both my Instagram and my YouTube channel. And I'm just going to condense it down to there. If some stuff trickles over to Facebook or any other social media, that's fine. But my emphasis will be there just to kind of direct my energy. And it's a time consumption thing. And I think that's where I'm going to be. And if you're interested in the message or the topics or the show, then that's where you can find me. And so I know that this was all a lot, and maybe this was just kind of a dump of what was on my mind and what I've experienced. But I hope that it drives home to each of you to continue to explore capability and truth, to look inward. If you have problems, look inward to solve them, to start exploring how you can be a better version of yourself. And I would say that all those experiences, I hope that you heard, it was reps and it was small right decisions. It is putting one successful process in front of the other and then stepping back to understand what I learned from those processes and those experiences. And again, the year of 2024 for me presented a lot of growth and preparation. If I would have gone into professional promotion or success, I think it would have just been different grass than the grass I'm already consuming on this side of the fence. And that is not what I think is meant for me. I'm meant for something much larger. And I also embrace that value to be able to say that exact phrase, because to start 2024, I don't think that I would have described myself as deserving of that or held value for myself to understand and come to terms with that, and then to live up to that expectation and elevate and empower myself. So a lot learned this year. I will say that I'm open to many detours and redirects. Because again, as 2024 was going to go, I certainly took a lot of detours and there's a lot of redirects provided for me that I learned more about my own truth and capability. And so if you're joining me on this journey, I'm just going to ask like one final thing. If you like the show, if you like these podcasts and these messages, like, subscribe, comment, because I want more community. I want more interaction. I'd love to do a Q&A of the questions that you have for me or you have for a larger body of people, and we get an exchange going in community. And I would say I would ask you to share the show. If you're getting value out of it and this is something you tune into and that you're becoming a better version of yourself because of, or I'm a part of that, share the show with other individuals. So I'm done. A little under an hour, my longest solo podcast ever. But I would just say, I love you all. Continue to explore truth and capability in yourself. Surround yourself with people who believe in that same message of truth and are exploring their own capability. And 2025 will be a better year for you, I promise. As always, thanks for joining me and listening into the Stronghold Podcast.